2 days before Christmas, a father raced through traffic, heart pounding, only to arrive at the hospital and hear the words no parent should ever face: his 2-year-old daughter, once full of life, was gone. Her small body marked by bruises that told a story more horrifying than anyone dared imagine. This isn't just another tragedy, it's the kind of case that grips your soul, keeps you awake at night, and forces you to question how such darkness can come from those closest to us. And if you want to uncover the truth in stories like this, real tragedies, real people, and the relentless search for justice, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear is a case that will leave you shaken, heartbroken, and demanding answers. In the early hours of December 23, 2019, a frantic 911 call led first responders to an apartment in Kansas City, Missouri. What they found inside was every parent's worst nightmare: a 2-year-old girl, unresponsive, her tiny body marked with bruises that told a story no child should ever have to live. Her name was Stevie Osborne. A lively, radiant little girl whose smile lit up every room she entered, now at the center of a devastating tragedy. The questions came quickly: what had gone so terribly wrong that night? How could an ordinary evening spiral into unspeakable loss? As investigators traced Stevie's final hours, the unsettling details they uncovered would leave her family broken, her community searching for answers, and the world asking why. Stevie Osborne entered this world on April 28, 2017, in Kansas City, Missouri, to parents Abigail and Gary Osborne. Her very name carried love and legacy. It honored her paternal grandfather, Steve, and her late maternal aunt, Allison, who had passed away in 2004. From her earliest days, Stevie blossomed into a delightful toddler with sparkling brown eyes, strawberry blonde hair, and a smile that seemed to radiate pure joy. By just 2.5 years old, she had already become known for her cheerful personality and her ability to brighten even the darkest days. Her daycare provider remembered her warm greetings in the morning and her sweet goodbyes in the afternoon, simple gestures that left lasting impressions. Her Aunt Kimberly lovingly called her pure perfection and said she was always the prettiest girl in the room. Stevie adored music and showed a natural gift for singing. She cherished her stuffed animals, especially a blue and pink sloth she had picked out during a shopping trip with her dad. She was captivated by Disney movies, particularly Frozen, with a special love for Olaf and Anna. Her playful bond extended to her grandmother's cat, Charlie, and she often made her family laugh with her mischievous antics, like sneaking sips of her father's soda or nibbling straight through the middle of his sandwiches. Gary Osborne, her father, was a graduate of Park Hill High School, and he treasured every moment with his daughter. For him, Stevie was not just a child, she was his light, his reason, his pride. But the vibrant life that filled their days would soon be overshadowed by turmoil and, eventually, tragedy. Back in 2013, Gary had begun dating Abigail, a fellow student, shortly after his graduation. Their young romance grew quickly, and they moved into Abigail's family home. Abigail pursued work in healthcare as a nursing assistant, with dreams of becoming a registered nurse. The couple eventually married and later welcomed their daughter, Stevie. But just 5 months after Stevie's birth, cracks in their relationship deepened. Abigail filed for divorce, and Gary described her as emotionally distant, making communication nearly impossible. He claimed he often discovered problems only through her actions, not through conversations. Despite this, he remained committed to fatherhood, determined to provide for his daughter. The separation grew tense. Abigail accused Gary of owing months of child support, even though he had been covering household expenses. Soon after, she asked him to leave the home, saying Stevie needed her own space. With nowhere else to turn, Gary moved back in with his parents. Things escalated further when police served Gary with an emergency protection order based on allegations that he had tried to choke Abigail years earlier. The case, however, lacked evidence, and the order was dismissed, but the damage was already done. For over 3 months, Gary was barred from seeing his daughter, missing Stevie's very first Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's celebrations. In January 2018, the court granted joint custody. Abigail retained primary residence, while Gary was awarded visitation every other weekend, plus one overnight visit each week, along with a $700 monthly child support obligation. Not long after, Abigail remarried a man named Corey. Though Gary had limited interactions with him, he admitted Corey seemed more stable than Abigail's previous partners. Yet even that marriage ended in divorce by early 2019. By then, Abigail had found love again, this time with Joseph, a former classmate of both hers and Gary's. Originally from South Korea, Joseph quickly became an important presence in Abigail's life, and soon, they moved in together. December 19, 2019 began as an ordinary day for little Stevie and her dad. She was buzzing with excitement about an upcoming family Christmas party, where she'd see her great-grandmother, Virginia. Gary had no way of knowing that when he dropped her off that day, it would be the last time he ever kissed his daughter goodbye. On the night of December 21st, Abigail, then working as a critical care nurse at St. Luke's Hospital, received a disturbing text from Joseph. He told her Stevie was unwell, vomiting, and not herself. When Abigail returned home around 2 a.m. on December 22nd, she found her daughter pale and lethargic, just as Joseph had described. He explained that Stevie had tripped over the family dog and hit her head on the tile floor, leaving a noticeable bruise on her forehead. Later that day, Stevie attended the family Christmas gathering. But relatives immediately noticed something was wrong. In photos from that night, Stevie sat in her mother's lap wearing pajamas, her face pale, marked with bruises, and her tiny body weakened. She vomited repeatedly during the party. Family members watched with worry, but Abigail dismissed their concerns, insisting Stevie was just clumsy and a little under the weather. What troubled relatives even more was Joseph's behavior. He insisted on being the only one to change Stevie's clothes each time she was sick, refusing any offers of help. The following morning, December 23rd, things took a devastating turn. While Abigail was at work, Joseph called her in a panic. Stevie had fallen out of bed, he claimed, and was now unresponsive. Abigail instructed him to call 911. Emergency responders arrived at the apartment complex to find Stevie covered in bruises, her small body limp and lifeless. They rushed her to Liberty Hospital, where she arrived in cardiac arrest. Gary was at work when the call came through. He raced to the hospital, covering a 30-minute drive in just 15 minutes. During his frantic drive, Abigail's updates only grew darker. At one point, she told him through tears, "I don't know what's going on. I think she's dead." When Gary finally arrived, his desperation to see Stevie led to a misunderstanding with hospital staff, who initially blocked his entry and even involved law enforcement. But once police confirmed his account, they realized he was simply a distraught father clinging to hope. Doctors discovered Stevie's injuries were catastrophic. She had severe brain trauma, skull fractures, and abdominal damage. She was transferred to Children's Mercy Hospital for advanced care, but the prognosis was grim. Medical teams determined Stevie had been deprived of oxygen for over 20 minutes, time that left her brain critically damaged. A neurosurgeon broke the news to her parents. These injuries were not accidental. The severity suggested they had been intentionally inflicted. As mandated by law, medical staff at both hospitals reported the case to Missouri's Department of Social Services, triggering an official investigation. Family members who had attended the Christmas party voiced their concerns, recounting Stevie's bruises, vomiting, and unusual lethargy. Abigail, when questioned, revealed the text messages she had received from Joseph about Stevie's condition. She admitted finding her daughter ill at 2 a.m., yet as a critical care nurse, she had failed to seek medical help. Joseph's behavior drew further suspicion. At the party, he had insisted on being the only one to care for Stevie. Later, he admitted that after the gathering, he and Abigail had argued over the bruises. The fight escalated into physical violence. He pulled Abigail's hair and threw her onto a bed while she held her child. Though she considered calling the police, they decided Joseph would simply move out in the coming days. Joseph would later attempt to deflect blame, even suggesting that Stevie's paternal grandfather might have caused her injuries, a claim with no evidence. Meanwhile, Gary stayed by his daughter's side, whispering to her, reassuring her that she'd be okay. In his grief, he began imagining a future where he could finally gain sole custody and protect her from harm. But the medical reality was crushing. Stevie's brain had stopped communicating with her body. Her pupils no longer responded to light, an ominous sign of brain death. Doctors prepared one last effort, a craniotomy, an invasive surgery to relieve pressure in her skull. At just 2 years old, Stevie was about to undergo a procedure no child should ever have to endure. Gary could only watch helplessly as his daughter was wheeled into surgery, praying for a miracle. Hours later, he and Abigail were led into a private room, where the surgeon and chaplain awaited them. The looks on their faces told the story before words were even spoken. Stevie had gone into cardiac arrest during the procedure. Despite desperate attempts with CPR and a defibrillator, doctors could not bring her back. On December 23, 2019, at 1:28 p.m., little Stevie Osborne was pronounced dead. She was only 2 years old. On December 23, 2019, just 2 days before Christmas, Gary recalled being paralyzed with shock as he tried to process the unimaginable tragedy before him. When he looked at Abigail, what struck him most was not grief, but what he described as a cold, tearless expression. According to Gary, Abigail picked up her phone and, without emotion, told her mother, "You can tell everybody to go home. She's dead." An autopsy conducted on Christmas Eve revealed the full extent of Stevie's suffering. Her small body bore bruises and contusions across her forehead, scalp, upper lip, chest, abdomen, pelvis, hands, wrists, and legs. Internally, doctors found hemorrhages in her abdomen, bowels, and beneath the skull. The conclusion was chillingly clear: Stevie had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her death was ruled a homicide. A criminal investigation began immediately and stretched into the new year. On January 6, 2021, investigators issued a warrant for Joseph, Abigail's boyfriend and the primary suspect. But upon learning of the warrant, Joseph ended his life at his father's home, using a firearm in the bathtub. To police, his suicide was a silent confession. They saw no need to pursue further charges against Abigail. Yet, the Children's Division investigation reached a different conclusion: Abigail had been negligent in Stevie's care. Joseph had left behind a 2-page letter on his computer, discovered by his brother and handed over to Gary. Hoping this letter might reopen the case, Gary delivered it to police. Instead, he was told it would change nothing. The case, in their eyes, was already closed. Written on Christmas Eve, Joseph's final words revealed his inner torment, feelings of loneliness, self-destruction, and the belief that the soul lived beyond physical death. He explicitly denied harming Stevie, claiming her death had nothing to do with his decision to end his own life. Using the metaphor of an hourglass, Joseph described his time as having run out. He also voiced frustration at the discrimination he faced for his mixed Korean heritage. His last request: for a friend to scatter his ashes across the world. Despite Joseph's words, Gary refused to believe he alone bore the blame. He felt critical warning signs had been overlooked, and that Joseph's death had been a convenient excuse to close the case. Authorities had even pointed to bruising on Stevie's ear cartilage as evidence suggesting a man's hand was responsible. For Gary, the justice system had failed. He was left in the dark, his grief compounded by silence and indifference. Reflecting back, he admitted with deep regret, "Everything was good before we got married. I was very young and very stupid. I hate to say it, but at the time I was in love and ignored so many red flags. Now I look back and think, if I had noticed those things, maybe I could have saved Stevie." For the next 2 years, Gary waged a relentless battle for justice. He called the victim's advocate nearly every day, but received no answers, so much so that he couldn't even remember her name. Desperate, he turned to Clay County Prosecutor Robert Sanders. When Sanders invited Gary and his family to a meeting, they arrived to find 4 armed officers standing guard outside his office. Gary's heart sank. He already knew the news would be bleak. Inside, Sanders delivered the words that crushed him: "It's not illegal to be stupid. It's not illegal to be a bad mom." Gary was outraged. He believed that if Abigail had faced a jury, the truth of her role in Stevie's death would have come out. But Sanders dismissed him with finality, saying, "We got the guy who hurt your daughter." For Gary, this was not justice at all. There had been no trial, no conviction, only silence, and a story that the media barely touched, leaving Stevie's voice unheard. Still, consequences lingered. Abigail faced the possible loss of her nursing license in Missouri. She retaliated by filing a civil lawsuit against the Children's Division and its director. Before trial, the Children's Division gathered extensive evidence: medical reports, autopsy findings, testimonies from investigators and experts. Abigail, in contrast, offered little defense, relying mainly on family testimony and her own words. When the trial opened on March 7, 2023, contradictions immediately surfaced. Abigail's stepmother testified she saw no bruises or signs of illness at the Christmas party, contradicting both other family members' accounts and Abigail's earlier statements to investigators. Abigail admitted that Stevie had vomited several times and that she considered the possibility of a concussion. Yet she chose to treat her with Dramamine and Sprite rather than seek urgent medical care. She also conceded that Joseph had a violent temper, even punching holes in doors, but still left Stevie in his care instead of with her great-grandmother. The most pivotal testimony came from a pediatric specialist. She testified that Stevie's injuries were not typical childhood bruises, but consistent with child abuse. The bruising on her forehead was evidence of severe intracranial bleeding. Given Abigail's medical background and Stevie's visible decline, the specialist concluded Abigail had failed to protect her daughter and had committed clear medical neglect. The court agreed. It ruled that Abigail was negligent, aware of Joseph's temper and the risks he posed, yet still leaving Stevie vulnerable. The judge denied her appeal to remove her name from the state's child abuse and neglect registry, cementing her culpability, even if the law stopped short of criminal charges. On December 28, 2019, family and friends gathered at Park Hill Baptist Church in Kansas City to remember Stevie. Funded through Gary's workplace trauma support program, the service was filled with co-workers and loved ones. Despite doubts about Abigail's role, Gary allowed her to attend, believing that if she was innocent, Stevie deserved her mother's presence. Abigail spoke of Stevie's adventurous spirit, her comfort to others, and the joy she brought. But Gary's trust was shattered when he learned, hours later, that Stevie had been buried without him or his family's knowledge. Abigail had failed to notify them, leaving them absent as Stevie was laid to rest. Determined to honor his daughter and seek justice, Gary launched a GoFundMe campaign. His goals were clear: to secure legal support and to create a lasting memorial for Stevie. The fundraiser raised just over $4,000, far short of the $50,000 needed. His vision was to transform Stevie's resting place into a serene tribute and purchase a memorial bench. In his words, "Stevie's memory shines brightly in my heart, but her resting place doesn't yet reflect the vibrant spirit she was. I'm determined to give her a headstone that captures her essence, a tribute free from pain and shadows." Gary's pursuit of justice has been long and unrelenting. For him, it is about more than accountability, it is about ensuring that Stevie's story is not forgotten. Her light, though extinguished too soon, continues to shine through his determination to protect her legacy. Thanks for watching. If stories like this captivate you, join us as we uncover more true crime cases from around the world. Don't miss out, subscribe now, and stay with us for more gripping investigations.